Alrighty, folks. Now that I've totally ripped your heart out,
That hurt.
didn't it
It
though?
really did.
Didn't
That
it though?
was heavy, THK.
I know.
Yes.
The video that I opted to open for this, it was a video that was composed and completely put together for the 100th anniversary of World War One. Of course, that passed us a few years back, but it's something that, as a military historian, we're always arguing with, and it's something as a historian one is always arguing with. But tonight, this is going to be kind of a discombobulation. So for the folks who are joining us out there, welcome. Glad to see y'all here. Hopefully y'all are doing well. We're trying a wonderful little thing here where we just talk history stuff with a bunch of people. Tonight, we pulled aside the Yangbot. Yangbot is with us.
Beep, burp. Beep,
Yes?
boop, beep, bop. Hello, I am the Yangbot. I am also an educator. Not of history, but I do have some social studies.
Yes. We had Midnight, and then something came up, and unfortunately Midnight couldn't be with us, so we have Midnight Light, also known as Picobot. Pico.
Hello, I am Midnight 2.0. I'm here.
the upgraded version.
I'm a student.
You are a student. And then we also have Sumi with us.
Yes, hello. It's finally a pleasure to be with you all.
And it's a pleasure to have you and the rest of you here. For those of you who have missed me mentioning it before or haven't gotten an intro off me before, so THK, as you guys all probably know me, I am a military historian who works for the Department of Defense. I am now on my 4th year working in the DoD, so I handle things like we see in that opening video an awful lot, which is probably why I opted to open with that tonight. I think that's why.
Just
Yes.
not a coincidence. None at all.
Not at all. But I encourage, if anybody ever has had questions for a historian, or you had experiences with history, or you have questions about history, or things to share, to always speak up in these streams. These are kind of the opportunity for people who are in education, not necessarily history, just education in general, to kind of interact with people. And it's a much more light-hearted setting than I probably set the stage for with that video. But it was a good video, and I wanted to make sure people kind of saw it. So, but tonight I figured some of the things that we would kind of jump at, we'd be sharing some experiences that we have had from the education standpoint with Yang, with student who isn't in history, with Pico, or a student that has actually focused a little bit on history, which I believe Sumi has. So, and then of course, my experiences, which are extremely boring. So, that was a joke. You can laugh at that.
Chat, he's lying. He's an amazing historian.
I'm an world's okayest historian.
World's okayest boss. Buy that mug.
I'd like to think you're in the top percentage of historians.
I'm in a rare percentage of historians. I'm not sure I would say I'm in a top percentage, but I'm in a rare percentage of historians. So, and that kind of brings up a good point, though, is that historians in of themselves are kind of in a rare percentage of employment when it comes to their actual position. So that's something else that we might talk about later tonight or on a different stream. We'll kind of see how that shakes out. I apologize. My full intent tonight was to have me be on camera, and you guys just assaulting me with terrible subliminal messaging. But when I planned this out this evening, logistics wasn't in mind, which is terrible because one of my focuses in history is military logistics. But apparently, I can't figure out the logistics of a video camera.
What?
It's okay, it happens to the best of us.
It's all good. We can help figure that out for another time, another stream.
Well, the problem is that there's no good way to do it in this room. So it's something we'll have to figure out in a different way. But I'm kind of gonna roll this off. I've had received a couple of emails. So on the website, I tend to get a lot of emails from people who are probably part of history themselves, but they just don't know it. And when I say that, I mean these are 60, 70, 80-year-old people who probably shouldn't be using a computer.
Oh no. Yep.
But every now and
Feel
then, I'll get that one email. And that one email is usually from like a 16, 17, 18-year-old kid. And basically, make the background a fun history picture. Like, no, stop it. The whole point was we were going to do something different with it, but we're leaving the background. But 9 times out of 10, one of the questions that I'll get basically is, what are the recommendations when dealing with history? So, and I had to probe one of these guys, for 4 or 5 different emails worth, and it finally came out where he's like, I'm worried about taking history courses because I'm worried that the instructor is going to be monotone and boring. And then I realized that it was probably Seven Size who was sending me emails, and I cut him off. No, that's not really what happened.
Wow, okay. Out of all the concerns from an education standpoint, whoever writes that is like the least of your concerns, okay? Your professor's goal is to make sure that you become curious about your subject field. Doesn't matter, their tone of voice may impact how you perceive it, but if you put in the effort to any subject field, doesn't matter who your professor is, you're going to be able to dig into that field. So I understand the concerns about, any professor. I don't understand why it's always associated with history. I think it's just interesting that historians are viewed like history or any kind of like social study profession. They was like, oh, monotone. It's like, what about math? What about English? What about that random basket weaving course? What does they have monotone? Speakers, professors, right?
Random basket weaving course. I'll say my thoughts to the end. We'll run down this for all of you. So, Sumi, if you have any thoughts on? Surely, I know that you've been through a good number of history courses. Have you encountered any like that?
From my experiences over the years, I would say it's about half and half. Most of the professors I've had were very, what's the word I'm looking for? They're very open-ended. They're very considerate towards everyone's feelings on certain historical subjects. Not everything is, solidified just from textbook readings. They always encourage us to reach out to our own thoughts based on the material we learn in class and in lectures, and on our own too. It's all an important, intricate process when it comes to university, undergrad, and graduate studies.
That makes sense to me, and I think I would largely agree with that as well. Midnight. I'm sorry, Pico.
It is perfectly fine calling me that. but with my standpoint and my experiences with this, honestly, I've not had any experience with the professor's like tone being all monotone and basically boring. What I've noticed in undergrad is that the professor just goes out of their way to make all the course material basically more interactive among the students. And not only that, but like the professor just did it, the professor's attempt to make learning fun, and they just want it to be interactive, and they want to teach it in a way that the students will retain the information that they are teaching, because parts of history are very important.
Right.
That's
Hmm.
basically what I've learned and experienced so far.
Well, before I share with y'all what I basically told this individual, I'll pass along a couple things here. So Will, mentioning that he hasn't had a bad history teacher and is to the point where he wants to teach history himself. That's absolutely outstanding. And I'm glad to hear that you've never had a bad history teacher. Nothing makes a class more unbearable than having a bad teacher. And when I say a bad teacher, there's many different forms of bad teaching, right? And I'm sure Yang will pipe up if I say anything wrong here, but there's many types of bad teaching, okay? So, as Pico was saying, you can have a problem with how you deliver content and you make it palatable to an individual, because every student is different, right? And they're all going to make that connection in a different way, which is one of the biggest challenges of an educator. Another thing is if you are just flat out boring in your instruction, or if the fact that you're teaching the class and you clearly don't care about the results of your students, it's going to show. If you're miserable in your job, that's going to show too. If you're not really liking teaching, that's going to show. So there's many different forms that this can take. And I'm speaking as somebody who's the child of two educators myself. It's something that's definitely a problem, and we see it, especially at the lower levels of education. And I need to be clear. So when I'm talking about lower levels of education, it normally, where I've seen things start to go awry, is between about 5th grade and 9th grade. It seems to be that middle school age
Oh my
where
goodness.
you have the largest proponent of instructors who just check out. And I think some of that has to do with the age group. But another thing that I think it has to do with is that administration does not understand and cannot comprehend that this is an age where you have to think outside the box. You can't do things like you do in high school or in elementary, because the students are just, they're in a different phase of life. And unfortunately, my poor mother, she was a middle school educator, and she had figured that out, but she didn't have support of her administration to actually do what she needed to do to keep things interesting. So I think that has a lot of a factor in it. Gilgamesh here, history teacher in high school was amazing and funny. It's why I'm scared to say I like to take a history course. You know what? I hear that a lot too, and I've found that generally it is normally in the primary education bracket, the history teacher, the social studies teacher, that's like the cool guy who's always just like, "What's up, dudes?" Or like mine used to play Pink Floyd's The Wall whenever we entered class every morning.
Oh wow.
I had another one that always played Billy Joel's "We Didn't Start the Fire." I mean,
Wow.
I mean, these were the coolest of the cool teachers. I swear. And to be honest, it was really my 7th grade instructor who really got me heavily interested. I mean, you have to remember, when I went in school, it's post-Cold War era, but it was close enough to Cold War era where there were still fallout shelter signs on the walls. And this guy was so great. He used to actually be just like, all right, we're going to do a hands-on learning thing. What's hands-on learning for history? Well, what you're going to do, class, is you're going to actually, I'm going to randomly sound in a little blowhorn thing in the classroom. You hear that blowhorn, get under your desk, duck and cover. Well, what's this for? This is what we used to have to do because of potential air raids. I mean, it's traumatizing in a way, but in another way, it's just like, damn, I mean, if you're making the connection, you have the materials to do it, go for it. So, it's a definite real thing. Now, on the other hand, I had an instructor in undergrad when I was at Maryville University who had a story for everything, but the way he presented it, he was so boring about it. It could have been like the coolest thing you ever heard, and all that you might have actually retained is the sound of him breathing. And he would just talk.
Gosh.
He would talk at you.
Yep.
So, and that was actually the lowest grades that I got in undergrad were in his classes because of it. So, yeah, it's a challenging thing. However, that being said, I'm going to go back to what Yang said. You can have that professor in anything. Literally anything. I had an instructor that used to try to be over creative and over ridiculous in their teaching, and that is also distracting and off-putting. He was an English instructor, and he used to be very animated and very comical in his deliveries, and it just annoyed me. That's all it did. Of course, then again, I think this was the same instructor that I said, oh wow, he's like, you're really good at writing, and I'm just like, oh wow, it's as if I'm a third-year history student or something that has written research papers. Who would have thought I'd be good at English 101? So,
Who would have thought? You know, apparently reading and writing are correlated? What?
apparently so.
No way.
Can't be me.
Yeah, couldn't be. But Gil, that was kind of a long about way to get to my recommendation for you. I would take the history course, and I would not hesitate at all to audit a history course if you ever get the chance to do so. Sit in on them, see what you think. Try out instructors, and one of the things that I learned really early is that kind of get a feel for what your institution's direction generally is. And I could open up a can of worms with this, but I'm going to say it in broad brushstrokes. There is a bias in education. It does exist. However, it only exists if you let it actually impact you.
That is very.
Yes. So when you are actually in a class, so for example, as a military historian, when I was in undergrad, one of the things that they were really trying to snowball and pitch to me at every turn is racism and sexism, racism and sexism, racism and sexism. All right, I'm just like, okay, well, guys, I got it. Racism and sexism happens in the military. It's a thing. Nobody's going to deny that. But I need to know a little bit more than about the civil rights movement. I need to know a little bit more than about, X, Y, and Z. I need to know about, can we talk about World War II for a minute? Please? Can we talk about Vietnam? Well, no, we got to talk about what happened at home during Vietnam. Okay, but we were at war. Well, the civil rights. I got that, you guys. It's you have to make sure that you are putting in some additional effort, because really and truly, it's not that the instructors are trying to pull you away from your subject matter. It's that this is the course material that is outlined that you're going to have to execute. Part of what you do to fill in those blanks is they're going to pitch you, your research papers or your midterms or things like that. So make sure you take opportunities like that to make sure that you find a research project that actually works in that configuration. Because 9 times out of 10, most of the people that run out and around and say, "Oh, well, it's a blue school. Well, it's a red school." Well, that's probably because you're not paying any attention to what you're supposed to be doing on the syllabus.
Ooh, can I add something to that, THK?
Absolutely, please do.
So this is a thing that I know you're gonna get really irked at when I say this.
Maybe.
But there's so many things in history that you can cover, right? Like what you just mentioned about going to war and people are focusing like things at home, because there's just so much that happens, right? Like even I think somebody told me about this, like in World War II, like our main attention is always going to be in that European area, right?
Yep.
Some of it will be in the Pacific coast, some of it will be in the I want to say it's like Northern Africa as well.
So you have the North African campaign, the European theater, and the Pacific theater. Yep.
But then you think about like what the heck was Argentina doing, or like what was Mexico doing? What was going on those moments in time? And it's like as if that famous quote is like, "Herder, you're a historian. What happened during XYZ?" And it's like, no, you can't, because there's just so much that happens. One year, there's how many people on Earth again? Like 1 billion?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Or 7? It's at least 1 billion. Forgive me if I don't remember how many people are on Earth, right? There's just so many that everybody has their own history going on. How can you say, oh man, my professor's dragging me to something that's like something I don't need to talk about, when it's a topic that should be talked about? Because if everybody has a story behind it, that's a story that needs.
And you're right. I think and I probably should have been a little bit more descriptive with this. So let me rephrase where I'm coming from with that. So where I'm coming from with that is, if I'm in a class about World War II, and this did not happen. I want to be clear that this did not happen. This is the kind of thing that did happen, though. If I'm in a class about World War II, what they were going to be teaching in that actually, wait a minute. I think I have yeah. Okay, so I'll use an actual example instead. Sorry. Scratch out the World War II thing. So if I'm in a contemporary American history course.
Okay.
How they're going to define that contemporary American history course is they're going to take it from, I think they drew it at 1911 through 1986. 1911 through 86. And we're going to say that just because we can. Right. So in this time frame, we have some key things that we have to look at. So we have World War I, World War II, Great Depression, Cold War, Korean War, Vietnam War, the Iran-Iraq War, and then the space race and things like that. Then you also have the Civil Rights Movement. You have Kent State. You have the women's suffrage movement and things like that. But what they're going to do, and they did this is a thing that happened, is they ignored World War I altogether. World War I didn't happen. They went to women's suffrage. They went to Great Depression. They skipped the first half of World War II, went to the Pacific Theater, skipped the beginning of the Cold War, skipped Korea, went to the Civil Rights Movement, got the tail end of the Vietnam War and said that we did it wrong, went to the Iran-Iraq issue, then they went to the Iran-Contra affair, and then they went to the fall of the Berlin Wall in the late 80s. That was supposed to be the contemporary American history course.
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
So,
okay.
And it was up to you to fill in the blanks. Now, I did 3 classes where that was actually the train of thought, where it actually did things like that. And again, I want to emphasize this because Yang is absolutely right. It is hard to teach history and cover all the bases. However, you might tie in the women's suffrage movement into World War One because of how things were changing during World War One, with
Right.
women actually being actively involved in component warfare. You might actually include, the Dust Bowl and the Great Depression and all this stuff getting wrapped up and toiled around into the post-war reconstruction after World War One and the collapse into World War Two. You might include the Korean War and the Vietnam War and Cold War tension and affairs. There's things you can do to wrap up those big key point events, and some instructors just don't, because their specialty doesn't include that. It's not their fault. It's on you as the student to make that connection, though. So, again, my issue is not with the instructor. It wasn't at the beginning of this, and it's still not. It's about students that take things a little bit too literally when they look at a syllabus. And then they decide to label it a blue school or a blue instructor or a red school or a red instructor. No, it's subjective no matter how you look at it, and it's up to you to use your brain and actually come up with things on your own, because unfortunately, as time goes on, you're not going to be able to have somebody make a thought process for you. So
THA, I think you're promoting this thing. It's new. I think it's called thinking, like
yeah, I know.
critical thinking. That's something revolutionary, man.
Yeah,
Maybe
Yeah,
there
who
should be a class.
maybe there should be.
who can imagine actually using your brain cells in 2021 and
Oh,
previous?
I know. I absolutely know. Let's see. Bonnie, I want to make sure. Let's see here. So, I know I skipped over a whole bunch of stuff, chat. I'm sorry. But Bonnie says, this reminds me, I actually had to write a paper a couple weeks ago about anti-colonial movements in World War II, and was so torn about how many case studies to bring up because there were some areas I knew more about or had more sources for. So, that's true with a lot of things, I think. Would you guys agree?
Yeah. I think you kind of mentioned this about biases in writing. When you're comfortable with something, you're gonna go to it, right? So those sources, of course, you're gonna immediately think, oh, I can dig through this source I can understand it quicker. I know how to phrase this in a certain way I want it, kind of thing. If it's a source that you're not familiar with, you may not use it because going through it may seem a little more confusing, or it may seem a bit like it doesn't connect as well. So it's hard to go for a completely non-biased writing if there ever is. And I think for UTHK especially, historians, a person who can write history in a non-biased view, I tip my hat off, because to be non-biased, I feel takes so much understanding of both sides, and you sometimes end up playing a villain to both sides.
I have found that often that is the case, and one of the things that I found myself doing more and more in the graduate programs is that you will actually, and I've done this, I will take contrary sides to what I actually believe in writing positions. And I've had an instructor call me out on that a time or two, like, why are you doing this? I said, well, to be honest with you, sir, it's because I need to learn how to do that. And I've deliberately made things harder, and I'll give you a good quick example of this, because I know some of my examples are a little bit long-winded. There was an instance where I did a research paper on the failures of military logistic intervention in Bosnia. And I will never forget this instructor because they knew the detailed background. I'm not giving you guys the detailed background of my who, what, where, and when, but they're just like, your employer would be pissed off about this, right? It's like, well, sir, to be quite honest with you, my employer knows that this is what happened, and we have to account for everything, and I need to be able to actually stand there and do that. So it's difficult. It's also difficult when you know where to go for certain sources and you don't know where to go for other sources. That's another big thing. So
100% finding like some stuff is like super rare to find, and then you have like 20 million copies of like another source, right?
yes, yep.
It's like
Yeah, definitely. It largely depends on what kind of database you're looking up as well. Some are way more credible in some subjects than others, as unfortunate as it is.
I'm super glad you brought that up, because that is absolutely true. So, if any of you in chat are in university, please get with your library and find out if you have access to things like EBSCO or JSTOR. Please don't use Google Scholar.
That
Please-
is
Oh
one
goodness,
of
no.
that's actually one of the first things I did when I arrived to my university for my first semester.
Yes. It's a thing that I see a lot of sometimes, and while Google Scholar is not it's not bad, and indeed a lot of people have to use it, and a lot of high school students, I recommend they use it because it's free.
yes.
But when you are in a college setting, in an academic setting like university, those are paid resources. They have a lot more power to pull really strong stuff. So I'm talking about like you can get the legit documents of like the entire. I'll just throw out an example. You can get entire technical reports, military technical reports off of JSTOR. Okay, you're not getting that off of Google Scholar. You're getting that off of JSTOR. Or you're getting really detailed book reviews, or things like that. You have to pay for that stuff normally, so please, when you have access to the resource, please use it. So,
Take advantage of what your tuition's going into.
that's right,
Yes.
especially with how ridiculous tuition charges are. Please use them.
Don't get me started on that.
Yeah, don't get me started either. I just entered student loan repayment at $160,000. Thank you.
This is also true coming from the backgrounds of art history and Asian American history as well. Because oftentimes when I had to do undergraduate papers, like there were so many resources and databases that I just had to like scroll through just to find like the correct thing I'm looking for. But most of the time, I also have to look for images because a large part of history is also the images involved with the realities that took place. If I can go off on a bit of a tangent.
Sure.
Yeah, so for Asian American history and especially for art history, reality connotates like the actuality, the being having existence. It exists independently of that of the mind. Images are not only representation of reality, but also the things you see in the moment. They're products of the mind. A lot of that is usually left out in a lot of these sources I'm looking up. Like, you can always take words for like face value, but you always have to remember there's two sides to every story. So most of the time in condensed schedules or condensed classes with those syllabuses, you don't have much luxury to go into those.
Absolutely. Actually, that's very interesting. But one question I would have is, you're a little bit more recent with art history than I am. I also have a degree in art history, a bachelor's, but are they still pushing Art Store?
From my end, I would say it's like partially, but not as much as like they used to.
Okay.
Like in
Interesting.
the classes I've taken, most of the time it's like you learn about the different art periods in medieval times, ancient times, and even modern times. And most of the time, the sources you look up are like, most of them are like putting up airs on like how credible the European masters are and how we should like always follow these sets of rules when critiquing artwork, making artwork, when in fact like it couldn't be any further from the truth because everyone's opinion, like when they look at a piece of artwork or when they look at images associated with our most well-known historic periods, like everyone's opinions matter equally as much as what's, preached out in the textbooks or whatever your instructor reads off. So oftentimes that a lot of that substance usually gets left out, but thankfully on the bright side, most of that has been improving from what I've noticed.
That's very interesting. So you and I actually come at this from different perspectives from art history. So in my I guess in my education of art history, methods were second. So you learn about the art itself. The methods were all secondary, right? And this is
Yeah.
good to bring up too because your history has many different forms of how it's taught. So there's practical, applicative, methods, and then I'm trying to remember what the other constant is actually called, but there's basically 4 modes that history takes. So you have these 4 modes, and it sounds to me like I was probably brought up on maybe applicative, and it sounds like you were probably brought in on methods. But this is a great example. This is where when you see people arguing history, they might not necessarily be disagreeing. What they're necessarily arguing about, and I've seen this happen on Twitter a whole bunch with Twitter historians. This happens almost daily. They're
Oh, yeah.
they're arguing the same point at each other. It's how they get to the point that they're arguing about. And most of where that comes from is they have 2 different modes of history that they're using to get to the same conclusion. And unlike other fields like math, those modes actually matter for some reason to historians on how they get to that point, which is ridiculous and dumb, but it happens. We don't have anything else to argue about, so we argue about the methods we use. So, but that's I'm glad to hear that, and it does. It sounds like you might have a different method to get to your deciding factor when it comes to history. So I like how you were like math. Well, I was. But see, and this is another thing too, is that people tend to think that history is one of these things that it's a constant variable. It's not really flexible. Well, the facts aren't flexible at all. Facts are facts, and we deal with facts. We don't really, I mean, there's some people out there that would love to rewrite history. They would love to tell you, like, the South wasn't all that bad. Well, that's where you're wrong, bucko. But we deal with a certain set of facts, and it's the little nuances within those facts that generally we're always trying to figure out. And the really cool thing that I like about history, and I've always tried to convey this as much as possible, is no matter how much time we spend deciphering those little nuances, they have major impacts and major implication. But we're never going to be able to decipher all of them. Mainly because, what Yang said towards the beginning of the stream, we're not going to know everybody's story, every second of the story, from everybody that's involved with everything. You seriously think that we have an oral history and a documented account of literally everybody involved with the atomic bombings, you'd be wrong. So it's a thing. We don't convey it properly, I don't think, in education a lot of the time. And I think that's one of the struggles that we have when we're teaching history, or we're talking history, or we're walking it through, or somebody's, talking history to us, but we have this preconceived notion of what history has previously been for us. We don't think about those little nuances, and they're very important.
They are very important. I definitely agree on that end.
Yeah. So, interestingly enough, too, Sumi, since you've come up through the art history side, I will point out it was actually my art history degree that got me the job in DoD in the first place. It was not.
Wow.
Yeah, it was not my history background. It was the art history one, and this might be good for a piece of job advice for some of you who are interested in this, or just in general. If you have an academic advisor who actually cares, make sure you stay close to that academic advisor, because they're going to be looking out for you. And the main reason that I always say, and I'm very upfront about this, it was the art history program that got me in to DoD. And the reason I can say that is because it was my art history advisor that had the contact at the installation. It was at the museum that was on post. I started as a volunteer over there. And then they're just like, you're actually really good at this. We have an actual paid internship program coming up. And I'm just like, get me in. And I had already had time in. And I had already had, a bare minimum amount of background checks done. So it made it very, very appealing to have them bring that on. So it doesn't necessarily matter if that advisor is in your field or not, is in your direction or not. If you can identify somebody and you can make friends with them, and you can show them that you actually really care about what it is that you're doing, and I don't care what field you're in. This is not limited to history. This is education, this is English, this is engineering, this is art, this is music, whatever. If you actually show a drive and you can identify that instructor or that advisor or that administrator that also recognizes drive, generally things will open up for you in a certain way. It doesn't always happen. I don't want to set everybody up for failure. And there are also ways that you can make things be a little bit more, it's a good way, a little bit more fail-safe, I guess. One of the things that this instructor also taught us how to do is how to market skills. Well, what do you mean market skills? Are you a historian? Yeah. Okay. What do you have to do to be a historian? Well, I have to know how to research. Skill. I have to know how to write. Skill. Okay. I have to learn. Do you have to know how to organize things? Yep. Skill. And that pretty much opens the door to so much more than what you were probably thinking of as just a historian. So, let's see here.
Yeah, adding on to that, definitely always keep those kinds of connections like within your reasonable range, and always like be able to express yourself freely to them as well in regards to your academic pursuits and your historical journeys throughout your educational career. I can't emphasize that more times than enough. That has been already.
Absolutely.
Point it is.
Absolutely. I think Yang's the one that has the newest job of all of us.
Yep.
And she was so gosh darn excited.
I am. It's been a fun journey. This job has been, and the thing is to continue this chain of connections. The connection that I had was that the people who are in charge were alumni of the same university as I, and I believe they also were in the same program as I. So, anyway, having that same background of, oh, okay, I know what you've learned, I understand like what you've been through as well, and me coming in thinking, having this new information that comes in with like the courses. So they had like a general idea of the university track, but they also knew that I was coming in with some different information as well. So having that connection of like a field, very, very useful. But in general, network with the advisors, network with professors. Having that connection is like a drop of wisdom, because they will know what you're going through. They know what skills you're gonna have. Like they'll know what you can market yourself as.
Yeah, absolutely. Making sure that basically, I guess what it comes down to, you hear this talked about a lot, but I think sometimes people don't quite get how important this is. Recognize self-worth, right? Recognize the importance of your talents, what you bring to the table, the energy that you bring that to the table, but recognize these things. And if you think that just one person is going to be interested in it, and I guarantee you one person is going to be, always, you need to include that. It is so important. So I do encourage anybody, when you're doing, and I'll tell you right now, one of the things that I did when I submitted my application for DoD, I went through every single history class that I had, and I pulled out all the research assignments that I had in that, and I listed every single one of them on that application. It counts. It counts. So, it's when people say, this is another big point that we see a lot as historians, and anybody who, Bonnie's gonna cringe, although maybe not, because Bonnie does has considered teaching, but for historians and history majors like me, I used to cringe whenever somebody said this. Oh, history major, huh? I guess that means you want to teach.
Wow.
Dear.
And my immediate reaction is, oh, guy who assumes history major wants to teach. I guess that means you want to get punched in the face, huh?
I hear that way too often as well. It gets ridiculous, honestly.
It does. But again, it goes back to that marketing thing that we just mentioned. If you know how to market it, that is not at all the limit of what you can do with that degree. You can do so much more. There's so many things that a history major could actually do with that degree beyond just teaching, beyond just being a historian. You can go into something where you are doing nothing but writing all the time. You can go into publication. You can go into public affairs, museum studies, archaeology, working with geologists, city planning. There's a whole bunch of different options. And really and truly, when you think about it, when you really sit down and think about your degree, and again, this is one of those things that applies to everything. When you really think about it, and I mean for a while, you start to realize, no, this degree is not just an engineering degree, or this is not just a math degree or a English degree. This is more than that. This just says what I studied. The amount of talent that you actually got off that degree if you did what you were supposed to do, and I'm of the opinion that most students probably do actually do what they're supposed to do at the university level. Can't say the same for high school. Sorry, high schools.
Yeah, it's always going to differ depending on what the curriculum has set for each level of academic teaching between high school, middle school, even so far as going back to elementary school. And
Correct.
besides the obvious undergraduate graduate differences in college.
Correct. Normally, by about the first or second year of undergrad, if that student doesn't want to be there or they're just there to goof off, they're gone, generally. So when you get towards that third and final year of undergrad, sometimes I was a super senior, so sometimes there's a fifth year or a sixth year wedged in there. Generally, by the time you get there, you've figured out the students in it for the long haul, kind of. How motivated are they? And that's where your academic advisors are really going to start showing a major interest in what you're doing. But yeah, so just kind of keep that in mind when you're dealing with really anything. I mean, we talk about history here just because I'm a history guy, but I mean, outside of Sophie, these other two are not historians. We got an educator. Pico, I forgot actually what your degree is in. I'm sorry.
I like to work with computers, either the software or the hardware.
That's the one. That major.
The thing with the machine.
Yes, you
Yes,
you
the
service
machines
you
and the
service the
zero
bots.
ones.
You service the bots with the things there, so you service yourself. Never mind. But
He works with doohickeys and
Yeah.
thingamajigs.
the whatchamacallits. But it's true even for that, because you are having to learn so much by what you're doing. It just everything ties in. So I like what Gil's got here. Everyone goofed off in my class. It's why he dealt with those fools by making fun of them. Yes, and I love every single instructor that always makes an example out of his students by just messing with them. True story. We had an instructor, also at Maryville, that would come into the class, and the first day of class, he's like, I want no cell phones in class. Okay? If I see you texting on your phone underneath your desk, I'm going to go with the most obscene reasoning that you could possibly looking at your crotch and smiling.
Oh dear, this is going already.
I'm just going to leave that right there, let you guys figure that one out for yourselves. Needless to say, we did have two people that actually did it, and he did ask them the question, hey, that ended
What
that.
you doing?
Yeah, what? I don't know any reasons that you would be looking down at your pants like that while smiling.
Please note that's like higher ed. Do not do that in elementary school.
Please do not do. Yeah, no, you only do that in undergrad or later. Don't. We also had one where a student fell asleep in class, and we had these. So you might know, we had Gardner's Art Through the Ages as a textbook. For those of you who don't know this book, it's about 1,500 pages full of nothing but art and analysis. Okay? He picked this book up and just slammed it on the floor as hard as he could, and I swear that whole building must have thought that there was a gunshot, and that kid pissed his pants. So...
That's the way to wake someone up.
I mean... Part of it is at that level of education, the instructors are just like, nope, we don't have to deal with this. Wake up, do what you're supposed to do. So I'm not saying do that if you get into education, and especially don't do that to the younger kids that are there kind of against their will. Please don't do that. But to the kids that choose to be there, still don't do that. But if you have to do something like that, maybe figure out something a little bit, I don't know, throw an eraser at them or something, draw on their face.
There's always a way to get your point across.
there is.
Be creative.
In the words of an educator, you don't go with the most drastic plan first. You
No.
go with you work your way to that plan, but you don't drop the book immediately.
Yeah, no, you don't bring the gauntlet down. But I mean, I think one of the biggest struggles, and I'm dealing with this right now in DoD. This is one of the things that we're dealing with right now, and some of you have even heard me talk about this, is trying to keep history relevant. So one of the things that we have a really hard time doing, and I'm gonna bring this up, and Yang's just gonna shake her head at me, because she's already heard this story. We collect command history, okay? Because we're at the command level, HQ level, and so we're collecting history. I have a whole bunch of units that are out and about, and they're sending me history to look through. I'm getting history reports that are 600 to 1,000 pages, and more than half of that 600 to 1,000 pages is about how Dale won the cubicle decorating contest, or how Building 108 won the Christmas light festivity decorations. I don't give a shit about Dale and his cubicle. What I do care about is, okay, how many people did you guys send out to build the temporary housing for hospitals during the COVID-19 pandemic? I care about that. That's what I care about. I don't need the extra 600 pages of fluff. Because let me tell you something, if my boss, or his boss, or his boss's boss, or his boss's 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 boss, which is actually Congress, so I shouldn't go that far up, but anyway, if they come down to me and they ask me for justification, they're going to have to look through freaking 600 pages of Dale and his pocket sand to find the one sentence that says, we did this. So, we're trying to renovate that and make things more relevant, and keep things interesting in the program as well, and trying to extend outreach to the community and partners around town, and all this stuff. But I think one of the biggest problems that history has is it of itself has stayed in history for perhaps too long. One of the things that I kept hearing around the time that I started streaming and doing history on Twitch is, history doesn't belong on Twitch. Well, what does that mean? Well, it's not the right platform for it. Is it not the right platform, or are you not the right person for the platform? So it's one of these things where history is having to possibly reinvent itself as subject matter and change the way that it's being delivered. Because otherwise we have people like that one poor sap in Britain. Bonnie might actually know more about this. He's trying to get World War II curriculum banned in Britain's public school system. Because
Excuse me?
Dear.
yes,
Wow.
because he feels it's too violent and it doesn't teach any applicable skills.
Listen, if we had to ban everything that was violent, you know how much we would be removing from history?
I
That
know.
would be
You know how much
way
we would
too
be
much.
removing in general?
Yep.
That's absolutely absurd to hear. I'm sorry.
Yes. I'll share
People
that.
didn't know the consequences.
I'll share that in Discord when we're done here, and I'll have a chance to go through and look for it. But yes, this was an actual movement. And part of the problem where I think that comes across is we have a problem with how we're delivering content. The content and the ways of delivery and how people receive and process information has changed. So,
Yes, definitely so.
and the problem with history, as I've been able to identify it so far, and you guys might have a different opinion, and if we go a little bit over, it's not too big of a deal. If it's not too big of a deal for you guys, I know Yang's got something, but one of the things that I've identified is that the curriculum has to be the same at the end. But remember what I was talking about earlier with those different modes of thought and how you get to the same conclusion. We need a new one that actually works for today. And that is maybe using more interactive means to reach people. Maybe it's to have more of those podcasts. Maybe it's to have more visual stimulating content. Maybe it's, breaking things down into smaller words, or maybe a more palatable reading style. Maybe that's what it needs to go to. Maybe that's where we need to start to lead people onto a path where they want to look into it more. And I think a lot of programs are dealing with that right now, but I definitely think history is probably one of the worst offenders of it right now, particularly because a whole bunch of the people in the history field right now are so damn old, and they're so damn stubborn. So,
All right, TJ, I have a question for you in that regard about different
no.
medium and sharing history.
Okay.
So in regards to, say, let's say the Broadway play, right? A lot of people have said they learned from it.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about using like entertainment and the like of those arts? Like, if you know the TV show Liberty Kids or Liberty, do you know that show by chance?
It's familiar, but I admit that I have not watched.
So I'm just curious about, how do you feel when it comes to delivering historical content in these different platforms while trying to minimize the compromise on the facts, if that makes sense?
So I'm going to answer that with saying that one of my classes in undergrad was actually American Military and Film. And there's a couple of fantastic books out there, and of course they're going to escape me for now, but there's a couple. Guts and Glory is a good accompaniment if you're looking at media and film. But there's a few. We used to be able to do this where you would have a film and be just like, all right, guys, I want you to watch this film. Okay. I'll use this as an example. There's a movie called The Longest Day. We call it the longest movie, by the way, because it's like 4 hours long. It's a ridiculously long movie. And if memories, no, that one's not silent. I'm thinking of The Big Parade. Anyway, but it's like a 4-hour long movie, and it's all about the Normandy landings. John Wayne is in it, and anyway. But the idea was, okay, I'm going to deliver this movie. I want you guys to watch this movie. It is entertaining, okay? Then I want you guys to read this text. So you front load them with the movie. You want to learn more? Or I assign you this. Read this in addition to. That tends to be how I would see it from an entertainment platform. So I'm actually I'll reach out on this too. Another example that I've used this before too, and everybody's gonna be just like, oh my god, THK, why would you do that? Yojo Senki, Saga of Tanya the Eagle. All right. It took me a minute to actually make all these connections, but I have actually had told people, "Hey, go watch it." Oh, what am I supposed to be getting from? Just watch. Just. I know it's anime. I know it's Magical Loli Girl. Just go watch it for a minute. And then they'll get back to me. They'll be just like, "It's really detailed." I said, "Yeah, I know. Can you tell me anything about the artillery pieces that they were using in it?" Well, what do you mean by that? So did you notice that they were using French 75s? Did you notice that they were using Mondragons? Did you notice the M1? Did you notice, how they were interpreting things at Kanai or at Marcel or anything like that? Because those are actually all in there. Well, no, I didn't. Well, go back and watch it again, and then read this document. And I think I gave them For the Common Defense, I think is what I gave them.
Yeah, building off of what you mentioned, THK, like, in my honest opinion, like, whenever you have to teach history, like, you always need to find that delicate balance between using all, like, the facts and wordiness of whatever topic you're trying to teach in the moment. But also you have to include like things people can actually come to conclusions with. In other words, like images or products of mind, for example. People try to understand what they see through their knowledge, experience, memory, tradition, language, all of that. Then they form an integrated whole view of images from what they process. And then those images reflect and change the world and people's behaviors based on their understandings of the images. So in that sense, like you can think of it like history also being created and shaped by those very images as well. So I often feel like that gets left out in a few areas. I'm not going to name them here, but it happens everywhere. It's not just limited to like American history or the stereotypical things that get associated with being a history major.
Absolutely. And coming out of an art history perspective, two movies that come to mind for me on this. The first one is What Dreams May Come with Robin Williams. I won't forget, they insisted that we watch that movie for one of our art history courses. And then what they did is they did exactly what I just did with Yojo Senki there. They said, okay, I want you to go in there, find all the art pieces that they actually referenced. What? Okay, well, if you couldn't find them, here's the document to support it. Oh, okay. The other movie that they threw at us was Persepolis, which, oh my gosh, I actually had to run out immediately and buy that movie. It's a great movie. If you guys haven't watched it, it's animated. It's wonderful. So it's a first-hand account of an Iranian woman during the Iran-Iraq War and the transformation of Iran therein. And it's a fantastic movie. It's technically, we would call that a primary source, just because of how it's drawn out, and that it actually is. And I can't remember who it is that wrote it. I feel awful that I can't, but we would consider that a primary source because it is a first-hand document of the events as they happened from this individual. So digital mediums can be used, and they are sometimes used. So
yes, visual aids for sure.
Yes.
They definitely are, like in that sense and many more. They are definitely primary sources. So if you always have the access or availability to access like those kinds of images or documentaries, whatever digital medium you're trying to access, like it's very much recommended to go out of your way and look into those.
And I'll also throw out there too, be careful if you watch a Russian film about history, because regardless if everybody lived at the end of the actual battle, everybody's going to die anyway in the movie because it's Russian. That's just Russian films. Everybody has to die in them. I don't know what it is, but I am
Russian
not
drama. You know?
I am not even joking. I am not even joking. That was one of the things that they were very quick to point out. They're just like, we want to point out in this movie, and this was one of my instructors, this unit actually did not get obliterated at the end. They just threw in a bomb there at the end to make it so that everybody dies, because that's what has to happen in Russia.
Oh dear.
So, but yeah, there's some things. Everything, of course, you're going to have to take with a little bit of a grain of salt. Like I would pray to the good Lord above, or whatever deity you pray to, or whether you pray to one or not. I would just sincerely hope that you would not go into something like Tanya the Evil and think, oh hey, World War I was about a bunch of magical girls shooting magical Mondragons. No, that's.
Oh my goodness.
I want to make sure you know they used actual artillery and there were no magical girls. But I want you to, next time you see something like that, take note of certain things like that. Take note of Well, they're talking about a lot of strategy about a world event that they're saying really did happen. So let me look into that world event. It's one of the reasons I don't get all that pissy about the Fate series.
Oh goodness, that's a whole nother rabbit hole right there.
It is a whole nother rabbit hole, but again, the reason that I don't have a problem talking the anime component on this stream right now is because I do a bunch of JRPGs. We're all from that kind of a background pretty much here. But there's you can use this if it gets you thinking, and I think I've mentioned this to you before too, Yang. If it gets you thinking about the subject matter enough for you to make that next step to looking into it, then it's done its job faithfully.
I can agree with that.
So that was a very long answer to a very short and concise question.
But no, you got your point across. It's definitely going to be used in media because, to me, the future of education is heading towards more visuals, more things that are like interest to the kids, but not necessarily. Honestly, with kids get things a lot, so
right.
Something like digital material important.
Yeah. Oh my gosh! So Kevin, Quiet Kevin, mentioned in chat the forbidden name from the Fate series. he mentioned Nero, and I don't even get me started on that. If you want to hear me really get on a soapbox, mention Nero to me. Just the worst Roman emperor ever, and just wait a minute. He's not in office now. Worse than Donald Trump, okay? So
Goodness, that could be a whole nother stream discussion in itself.
oh my gosh, it really
Yes.
could be.
Let's not get into.
We won't. We're not gonna do. We're not gonna do that. I will just say, for those of you who, for some reason, are hung up on the Umu girl Nero, I would encourage you to go read anything by Suetonius, and then get back to me and tell me how great you think Nero is. That's all I'm gonna say. Because Suetonius. Suetonius has some words that he uses for Nero.
Alright, y'all, you know what that means. You got homework.
Yeah, that's right. I want to see one-page reports from all of you, especially you, Gil, and especially you, Kevin.
Y'all gotta do your research.
That's right.
Yep.
So
That's the point of education, right? We're
Due
gonna see
Monday.
if you can apply.
9 a.m.
So, but again, that just kind of leads my point, because I saw a whole bunch of you actually jumping on that bandwagon with me. You guys know that. You guys know how bad Nero is, because inevitably, at some time or another, you actually read into this character. So, and if you didn't, just leave me in my blissful ignorance and let me believe that you actually did. So, anyway, hi chat. How are you?
Nero is, Zero rhymes with Nero. That's already enough, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, Caligula wasn't much better. I would argue, though, that there were at least some economic prospects for Caligula. But, so. Well, I don't want to keep us running full over too terribly much. I want to make sure, though, do you guys have any last thoughts? I know we were kind of all over the place this evening. This is the first time we kind of did something like this. This is just to kind of kick back and relax, talk some history stuff, some ed stuff.
Yeah.
But do you guys have anything else that you want to throw out there?
I want to throw something that was mentioned in the middle of the stream. Okay. So
Damn it, Pico, going back in time. Okay.
Yes, I am. Because it's important.
Okay.
This goes for anyone that is going to a university or going to college or will be going to a university and going to college. Don't expect like all of your professors just to lay out the resources in front of you. You should go out of your way, and what you have to do is you have to go out of your way. You have to ask your professors, go to a library, ask them, do research, look up the resources that become available to you when you become an undergraduate student of that institution or a graduate student of the institution. And when you locate those resources, be sure to take advantage of them. They are there to help you succeed.
Very well said. Very well said.
Big claps.
Yep. I'll award that 5 silent claps. There we go. But no, absolutely, especially since you're paying for it.
Mhm.
So
For sure.
yeah, so make sure you're using all the resources that institution gives you, because otherwise you're just throwing money away. And I don't care if you see that money right then or there. Eventually, you're going to see that money, and it's going to be coming from you.
Mhm.
I had one friend that kept thinking, "Oh, it's all right. It's on a loan. Yeah, you have to pay that loan back. It's not free money. That's not what happens." So, Sumi or Yang, anything else from you guys?
Oh, yeah. To add on to what Pico says, like, it's so important to always reach out for more help if you feel like you need the extra hand, because it goes without saying there are professors who do care about your success and they want to do everything in their power to help you succeed or do well on a paper, or you have a question besides like outside of lecture hours or discussions. You should always pursue like anything you might have interest in or you have a second thought about, because you never know when you may, miss out on an opportunity, or you may have to rethink a couple things along the way. Should always reach out to the available sources, and they're more than happy to assist you.
Absolutely. 100% agree. Yangbot.
Boop. I'm actually gonna go in a different direction because we're talking about history, we're talking about teaching it, we're talking about how do we explore it, how do we make it more flexible for everybody, and from the educator, from somebody who's worked in a school and worked with kids and have seen the lack of history being taught. Honestly, a lot of teaching history in the modern age will require changing the way education works in general, which I mean, we can't do that in terms of let's get Twitch into a classroom setting, but we could. It just takes a lot of time and a lot of efforts.
Yes.
And like when I say efforts, like, oh man, everything takes effort, right? It's hard because education has been very stagnant in its ways, right? We're all thinking traditional classroom. Even now with the pandemic, we still have a how do I put this nicely? We have administration who would prefer us to go back in person while not giving, the appropriate protective equipment for teachers. So, I want to see this change, though. This change in how we teach history. Kids, it's hard because, again, education is rooted in the basics of math, English, Herder. Let's go get to the top. But how do you build this and not consider how history is going to affect what they're going to do in the future? How do you not consider what computer science art, or even like, yes, it's just from a teacher's point of view, it's tough to be able to make changes, but we do our best to make those changes. And I am very, very happy and ecstatic that UTHK have chosen Twitch as a platform to start doing this kind of outreach, because you're a stepping stone of how we can use different kinds of platforms to educate.
Really, it was actually kind of work that kind of pushed. We had some ideas with work. I won't get into that, but
Yeah.
Twitch has started to show itself as an opportunity. In fact, when we wrap up here, I'm going to send you to another Twitch historian that's streaming right now. But there's a few historians that are jumping around on Twitch right now, and I've noticed an increase in the amount of education streams. I've noticed an increase in the amount of those streams where they're trying to they're not doing what Twitch was originally designed for. And when I say that, it's video game centered, is how I've perceived Twitch. But a lot of streams that I've started to see are things like building things, crafting things. There's music streams, like Greg Chun, for example. But there's a lot of different types of streaming that's starting to come out now, and I think people are starting to finally realize that this is a viable way to reach people. So I'll give you 3 audible claps for that. Those are very mechanical sounding claps, but you know, everything has its growing pains, so we're gonna have to figure out, you know, logistics of a few things as they come. Like tonight with the fact that I totally botched my camera. That's one of those logistics. But it's to get a discussion started, because education starts with a dialogue. It's never about I'm talking at somebody. It's supposed to be I'm talking with somebody, because education is supposed to be give and take.
Yes.
So
People need to education and schooling, 2 different things.
Yes. And with that, my last thing that I'll kind of throw in here, since everybody had a chance for theirs. My last thing is, if you don't go to school, like if you do not go to a university or anything like that, do not feel like that somehow does not make you an educated person. That's not how this works. Again, it goes back to what I said. If you are having dialogues with people, you are learning. And it is perfectly reasonable for you to have a decent lifestyle. It's perfectly reasonable for you to be well educated and not have that piece of paper in your hands. I am sorry if anybody out there ever told you that you had to have that piece of paper, and that's indicative of how smart you are. They are wrong, and they are lying to you. So I want to make sure that everybody that's here recognizes that education and knowledge comes in many different forms as well. I've known some of the smartest people that I know with history do not have a history degree. And I will also tell you that there are plenty of PhDs that could learn something from students.
Yes, that's also very much true.
So I want to make sure that we remind everybody of that. With that, I appreciate you guys. Midnight/Pico, thank you for breaking time out of your busy schedule.
Anytime.
Sumi, it was absolutely awesome to have you on here for the first time that we did this. Thank you.
Oh, of course. I'm so honored to be a part of this history in itself, you know, like we get to teach our generations of people like different ways to approach and think about how we learn and teach history. So it's all very relevant to this day.
Yeah, absolutely. And Yangbot, as busy as Yangbot is, I thank you also for being here. I know it's not easy booking Yang.
Been really busy around the place, Beep Boop Box. But if anything, thank you THK for taking time to organize this and getting us all together to do this, even rescheduling us.
Yes,
Thank you so much.
after the incident, not a problem. With that, folks, we are going to call that a wrap for the evening. Yes, Yang, make sure that you eat. I did see that. I will break the vibe of the stream here for just a moment. Make sure you eat.
Does dark chocolate Kit Kat count?
No.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to get back to you on that.
Of course you are. So our next stream is going to be tomorrow. I've called it Freezers and Microwaves. We're going to be back to Genshin Impact tomorrow night. I think I'm going to have Pico on. We'll see if who else I can kind of get on. And that'll be tomorrow at 8 o'clock. The next one of these, I got to schedule that out. I really liked how this worked tonight, so we're definitely doing this again. But in the meantime, I'm going to go send you over to Tadhood Historian right now. He's playing the game Verdun. He's the other Twitch historian that I'm aware of. There's a few of them, but he's the one that I know of the most. Make sure you guys give him some love over there. And we'll see you guys tomorrow night. Thank you again to our guests, and thank you to chat. We'll see you again.
Alright, take care.
Care
It was such
everyone.
an honor. Take care. Always support your historians and educators.